To analyze Gustave Flaubert is to analyze the antithesis of the polyphonic ideal. If Dostoevsky is the chaotic marketplace of independent voices, Flaubert is the silent, sterile operating theater. Madame Bovary is widely hailed as the perfection of the realistic novel, and therein lies its specific failure in the eyes of dialogic criticism. It is a text of absolute control, where the author's consciousness completely subsumes, defines, and judges the characters contained within it. There is no freedom here, only the rigorous, suffocating dictatorship of the just, the perfect word. We must begin by understanding the fundamental nature of Flaubert's artistic design. His stated goal was to be like God in the universe, present everywhere, but visible nowhere. He claimed impartiality. However, from a structural perspective, this impartiality is a deception. Flaubert is not absent, he is omnipresent as a judge. In the polyphonic novel, the author enters the fray as a participant, allowing the hero to challenge the author's worldview. In Madame Bovary, Flaubert remains outside and above, looking down upon his creation with a mixture of aesthetic disgust and ironic detachment. The surplus of vision belongs entirely to the author. Flaubert knows everything about Emma Bovary, her past, her future, the petty contents of her soul, while she knows nothing of herself. She is finalized. She is dead long before the arsenic touches her lips because she is denied the capacity to surprise her creator. The central tragedy of the novel is not Emma's adultery or her debt, it is the tragedy of the quixotic potential trapped in a bourgeois chronotope. Emma is a descendant of Don Quixote, but a degraded, localized version. Like Quixote, she reads narratives and attempts to impose them upon reality. She tries to live a novelistic life. However, the chronotope of the provincial French town, Yonville, allows no room for the heroic or the chivalric. Quixote travels the open road, a space of chance and encounter. Emma is trapped in the domestic interior, a space of stagnation and repetition. Her desire for the romantic is not a creative force, it is merely a consumption of clichés. Flaubert does not treat her reading habits as a genuine quest for meaning, but as a pathology to be dissected. He mocks her second-hand language. When Emma speaks of love, she speaks in the language of bad romantic novels. Flaubert exposes this relentlessly. He frames her discourse not as a voice to be heard, but as an object to be ridiculed. This brings us to the specific linguistic texture of the novel, the problem of heteroglossia and how Flaubert suppresses it. The novel is filled with different social languages, the romantic jargon of Emma, the scientific rationalist pomposity of Homais, the dull, bovine speech of Charles. In a Dostoevskian world, these languages would collide and interact, changing one another. In Flaubert's world, they are static specimens. Take the character of Homais, the pharmacist. He represents the common opinion, the rising bourgeois materialism. He speaks in platitudes. Flaubert despises him, yet gives him the last word of the novel. Why? Not because Homais has won a dialogic battle, but because Flaubert uses Homais to satirize the stupidity of the age. Homais is not a free consciousness, he is a puppet used to demonstrate the author's cynicism. The author does not engage with Homais, he displays him like a beetle pinned to a board. The technical mastery of Flaubert, and his greatest weapon against polyphony, is his use of free indirect style. This technique allows the narration to slip seamlessly from the objective voice of the author into the subjective thoughts of the character, without quotation marks or clear boundaries. Critics often mistake this for empathy, arguing that Flaubert becomes Emma. This is structurally incorrect. Flaubert uses this technique to infiltrate Emma's consciousness and expose its banality from within. By merging his sophisticated syntax with her naive, sentimental vocabulary, he creates a jarring irony. We hear Emma's thoughts, but we hear them through Flaubert's sneer. For example, when Emma looks at the moon and sighs, the narration describes her emotion, but the tone implies that this emotion is trite and derivative. The double-voiced discourse here is not a dialogue between two equals. It is the voice of the master correcting the voice of the student. It is a stylistic trap. Let us examine the famous scene of the agricultural fair. This is often cited as a masterpiece of counterpoint, and formally, it is brilliant. Flaubert intercuts the romantic seduction of Emma by Rodolphe with the banal speeches of the officials awarding prizes for manure and livestock. Rodolphe, we are connected by a mysterious fate. Official, 50 francs for the best pig. The effect is devastating. The juxtaposition strips the romance of its magic, revealing it to be as earthy and commercial as the farming awards. But consider the source of this juxtaposition. It is not accidental. It is not a natural collision of voices in a public square. It is a highly calculated montage orchestrated by the author to prove a point, that romantic love is a lie. The characters are not aware of the irony, only the reader and the author share this joke. The characters are victims of the structure. Rodolphe is not a complex villain, he is a functional device used to break Emma. The scene is a monologue of the author disguised as a dialogue of the characters. Furthermore, the chronotope of the novel deserves rigorous scrutiny. The time in Madame Bovary is cyclical and viscous. It is the time of ennui. In the polyphonic novel, time is a crisis. Everything happens in a moment of decision. In Flaubert, time drags. He devotes pages to the description of a wedding cake, a hat, or the layout of the village. This descriptive excess serves to reify the world, to turn it into a collection of dead things. The environment dominates the human. Charles Bovary's hat, described in excruciating detail at the beginning of the book, is a symbol of his entire personality, complex, ugly, mute, and passive. The objects in Flaubert possess more weight than the souls of the characters. Emma is crushed not by fate, but by the sheer accumulation of material reality, the furniture, the clothes, the bills, the mud. The background ceases to be a background and becomes a suffocating foreground that prohibits action. We must also address the nature of the ending. The death of Emma Bovary is the ultimate act of objectification. Flaubert denies her a spiritual death. There is no final epiphany, no reconciliation, no word of truth. There is only the biological reality of arsenic poisoning. He describes the taste of ink in her mouth, the heaving of her chest, the physical degradation. It is clinical. It is the gaze of the son of a surgeon. He treats his protagonist as a specimen on a table. Compare this to the death of Marmeladov or Svidrigailov in Crime and Punishment. Those deaths are spiritual events that ripple through the consciousness of others. Emma's death is a physiological cessation. The tragedy is not that a soul is lost, but that a beautiful organism has malfunctioned due to poor inputs. Flaubert's realism, therefore, is a realism of the surface. He polishes the surface until it shines, reflecting the author's own brilliance, but blocking entry into the depths of the other. He fears the messiness of life. He fears the carnival. There is no laughter in Madame Bovary, only the sneer. The carnival spirit, which regenerates and renews, is absent. The blind beggar who sings at the end of the novel is a grotesque figure, a reminder of physical decay, not a symbol of holy madness or truth. Flaubert uses the grotesque only to shock, not to liberate. In conclusion, Madame Bovary is a masterpiece of the monologic art. It is a closed text. The characters are finished, they cannot evolve. The meaning of the text is strictly controlled by the author's irony. There are no loopholes. Emma cannot be anything other than what Flaubert decrees her to be, a petty bourgeois adulteress with delusions of grandeur. While we must admire the aesthetic perfection of the sentences, the rhythm, the cadence, the visual precision, we must also recognize that this perfection is achieved at the cost of the living human voice. It is a novel of things and types, not of free consciousnesses. It is a prison built of diamonds. As a critic concerned with the freedom of the discourse and the interaction of autonomous subjects, I find the architecture of Madame Bovary to be magnificent, but tyrannically oppressive. It is the final word of the author, leaving no room for the reply of the hero.